In this fifth video of 6, we're going to carry on creating our gorgeous Instagram clone, Quasar, using vue.js, Quasar, Firebase, Node.js and Express. And in this video, we're going to connect our backend to our Firebase Cloud Firestore Database. We're going to grab all of the real posts from the database. Then in our app, we're going to trigger that endpoint on the homepage, display all of the real posts on the homepage. We're going to sort these posts by date, handle any errors, and we're going to add a really nice loading state using a skeleton component. And if you missed any of the earlier videos in this series, check the links in the description. If you're new here, my name's Danny. I'm an indie app developer and creator of Budget. If you want to learn how to create cross-platform apps and web apps using technologies like vue.js, Quasar, and Firebase, click subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss anything. So I have my app running and I have our backend running, the local version, and I have that running in the browser here, and we can see the result of this basic endpoint that just returns this simple array of posts. So let's modify this endpoint so that it grabs the real posts from our database and returns those instead. But first we need to connect to our Firestore database. So let's go to firebase.google.com/docs and then Cloud Firestore, and then get started. And it first tells us we need to create a Firestore database, and we've already done that, so we can skip all this. And then it says set up your development environment, and we want to make sure we've got Node.js selected here. So first we need to add the Firebase admin SDK to our app by running this command. So I'm going to copy that, and we want to add this to our backend. So I'm going to jump to the terminal which has the backend running, and I'm just going to close the server and install Firebase admin. And that's finished installing, and now it says initialize Cloud Firestore, and it gives us 3 different ways we can do this: initialize on Cloud Functions, initialize on Google Cloud Platform, or initialize on your own server. So if you're using Cloud Functions, then you can just initialize the database using this code. But since we're doing this on our own server, we're going to use this code here. So I'm going to copy all of this code and just paste it into our app. Just paste it here for now. And this Firebase admin is a dependency, so we'll leave that up here under this comment. But the rest of these, I'm going to cut those and put them under a new comment. After the config express section, I'm going to add a config Firebase section and paste those lines there. And you can see this line here is referring to a service account key.json file. And we don't have that right now. So we need to create a service account and get one of these service account key.json files. And we can do this on the Firebase console. So I'll jump to the Firebase console, jump to my Quasar project, and you might need to click on Add App and create a new web app, which you should also call Quasar. But once you've done that, if you click on One App here, then click on this Settings cog, and then Service Accounts, and you might need to click on Create Service Account here. But once you've done that, you should see this screen, and then we can now click on this Generate New Private Key, which will generate one of these service account key JSON files that we need. So I'm going to click on that, click on Generate, and that's downloaded. So we want to drag that into our backend folder. So I'm going to drag that into there, and I'm going to rename it to Service Account Key. And then I'm going to jump back to index.js and just adjust the path here. So this file is just at /service account key. So I'll just adjust the path accordingly and save that. And we should now have access to our Firestore database with this DB variable here. Let's grab the real post data from our database now. So we should have access to our database now with this DB variable. And if we jump back to that Firebase documentation page we were on, and if we scroll down, we have a read data example here. which is also using DB as the database variable. So I'm going to copy this code and I'm going to paste it into this posts endpoint after this array. And I prefer to use then blocks and catch blocks instead of await. So I'm going to remove everything up to before DB here. Then after this first line, I'm just going to add a then block. And this will return a snapshot. And then I'm just going to remove this for each up into there. So grabbing data from our database is really simple. We just do db.collection. Then we specify the collection we want to grab data from. And then we trigger get on that to get all of the documents from that collection. And this will then return a snapshot of all of our data. And then what we're doing here is looping through each document in the snapshot and logging out the document ID and the data associated with that document. So let's adapt this so that it grabs the post data from our posts collection. So we don't have a users collection, we have a posts collection. So I'm going to change this to posts. And I'm going to set this posts array back to an empty array. And so this should get all of the documents from the posts collection. And then this for each will loop through each document in the snapshot. And we can get the document data with .data. So instead of logging this out, what I'm going to do here is, as we grab the data for each post, I'm just going to push it into this posts array. And then when we're done, we're just going to send that post array back to the browser. So I'm just going to add posts.push and then doc.data. And I'll get rid of this console log. And I'll move this response where we're sending the posts data back to the browser up to just after this for each here. Because by that point, this post array should be fully populated with all of our posts. So I'm going to save that. We need to make sure our backend is running, and it's not at the moment. So just need to run npm start to get that started again. And that's running. Now, if we jump back to our endpoint, which is just loaded in the browser here, and reload, then we can now see our real post data from our Firestore database. But they don't look much fun like this. So let's display these posts in our app on the home page. Let's use this posts endpoint that we've created to display the real posts in our app on the home page. So I'll jump back to our app and I'll open up the home page, which is in source, pages, page home. And I'm going to create a new method called getPosts. I'm just going to close this array. So we need a methods object here. And I'll create a method called getPosts. We want to get the latest posts every time we visit this page. So I'm going to trigger this method in a created hook. I'm just going to log out getPosts for now, and then we'll trigger this method in a created hook. So I'll add a created hook and just call that method. So this .getPosts. Let's just make sure that method is being fired. If we look in the console, yeah, we can see getPosts there. So let's grab the data from this endpoint using Axios. So I'll jump back to that getPost method. I'll get rid of this console log. And we're just going to do this $axios.get, because this is going to be a get request. And we want to pass in our endpoint URL. So I'll just copy that from here, paste it in there. And this will return a promise with a response. So I'll add a then block with a response. And for now, I'll just log out that response. And we'll also add a catch block for any errors. So I'll add that here. And we'll just log out any errors. So I'll save that and let's see if it's working. We have an error here. It says access to XML HTTP request our endpoint/posts from origin localhost has been blocked by CORS policy. No access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. So this basically means that our app doesn't have permission to access this endpoint. Or in other words, this endpoint can't currently receive cross-origin requests, so requests from other servers. But we can actually set this header, this access control allow origin, to allow requests from any origin really easily just by using this response object that we have in our endpoint. So at the top of our endpoint, we can just add response.set. And then we want to pass in the header that we want to set. We want to set this access control allow origin header. So I'm going to copy that and paste that in there. And we want to set this to star or asterisk. So now any origin or any other server should be able to access this endpoint. So I'm going to save that. And I'll clear the console and reload our app and see if that's working now. And yeah, we have a response now and no errors. If we open that response, go into the data object, then we can see our data here from the database. So we can see exactly the same data that we can see here in the browser. So let's display these posts on our page now. So I'll jump back to page home.view. And we have this post array, which we've hard-coded some post data into. So I'm going to set this to an empty array. Just get rid of all the posts inside there. And back in our getPost method, after we successfully grab the data from that endpoint and we get the response, we're just going to add the data from this response to this post array. And the data is going to be at response.data. So all we need to do here is just go this.posts equals response.data. So we'll save that. And we can now see our real posts on the home page. If you want to take Quasar to the next level, check out my 15-hour course, Progressive Web Apps with Vue.js, Quasar and Firebase. In this course, once you finish creating Quasar, you'll then get to turn this into a progressive web app by adding home screen installation, pre-caching, caching strategies, background sync and push notifications. You'll also test and fix the app in all the main desktop browsers, as well as Android and iOS. You'll also find 2 big assignments and all of the completed source code for every module. Get the course with my promo code at dannys.link/QuasarPWA, and the link is in the description. So we have our real posts on the homepage now, which is pretty bodacious. But if we look at the dates on these, this first one was posted at 10:09 AM, and this second one was posted at 10:12 AM. But for this kind of an app, you usually have the latest post at the top. So we need to sort these by date in descending date order. And we could easily do this on the front end in our Vue.js, but wherever possible, it's best to do as much as we can on the back end. So let's do this on the back end. So I'll jump back to our backend file, index.js. And so how can we sort these posts by date? Well, if we jump back to that Firebase page we were on, and under Cloud Firestore, if we open up read data, we have an order and limit data page. So let's jump to that. And I'll scroll down a bit and look at this second example here. It says you could also sort in descending order to get the last 3 cities. So you can see they have a collection reference here, and they're triggering this order by method on it. And so this is going to order this particular query by name in descending order. So we can use this on our database query to order our posts by date in descending order. So I'm going to copy this bit and jump to our database query. So after we grab the collection, we then want to trigger this order by method. So I'll paste that in there, but we don't want to order by name, and we don't actually have a name field. If we look in our console here, we want to sort by this date field, and we want to sort in descending order. So I'm just going to change this name parameter to date, and hopefully our post should be sorted by date now. So I'll save that and reload the page. And yeah, that seems to have worked. We now have the latest post at the top. Let's add some error handling to this request in case something goes wrong with our backend or whatever. Because right now we're just console logging an error, which won't be much use to the end user. So we could just show an error dialog here if there's an error. And we're already showing an error dialog on the camera page. So I'm going to open that up, page camera, and here it is, the dialog. So I'm going to copy that and just paste that in this catch block. Indent that. And to check this is working, we can just change the URL that we're calling to a URL that doesn't exist. So instead of /posts, I'm going to change this to penguin balls, save that. We now see this error pop up. So that's working, and I'll just change this back to /posts instead of penguin balls. If the request to our endpoint takes a long time, which it can sometimes once the endpoint is live, then the user will be left with a blank screen. And we can demonstrate that by just putting a set timeout around this Axios request. So I'm just going to do that now. And we do need to remember to take this back out later on. So we'll add a set timeout with, let's say, 3000 milliseconds, 3 seconds. And I'll just move all this Axios request up into that set timeout. Save that. And we can see the user is just left with this blank screen while they're waiting for these posts to load, which isn't much fun. So we need some kind of loading state. So I'm going to set up a new data property in our data, and I'm going to call this loading posts, and I'm going to set this to false initially. And we're going to use this to display something else other than our posts while the posts are loading. So I'm just going to find our QCard component, which has our post inside it, and I'm going to surround that in a template tag. Just move that up there. And I'm going to add a v-if directive to this template tag. So v-if, and I'm going to add not loading posts. But if we are still loading posts, then we want to show something else. So I'll add another template tag under this one and just add a v-else directive to that. So if our loading post variable is false, then we show these cards with our posts. Otherwise, we show this. And I'll just put the text loading in there for now. And so if I jump down to our Axios request, just before we fire that request, I'm going to set loading posts to true. So I'm just going to add this.loading posts equals true. And then whether we get a successful response or an error response, we want to set this back to false again. So at the end of our then block, I'm just going to add this.loading posts equals false. And then I'll duplicate that and add that to the bottom of our error block as well. So let's save that and see if it works. And it took us a while to see the loading text. And that's because we need to set loading posts to true before this set timeout. So I'll just move that there. And let's try that again. So we can now see this loading text. But that loading text isn't really much fun. So let's jump to the Quasar site and see if we can find something better to display here. So I'm going to go to View Components. And one component we could use is the spinner component, which is pretty good. But we could make this even cooler by using the skeleton component. So I'm going to jump to skeleton. And this basically displays various different components in a kind of loading state like this. And we can have different kinds of animations and stuff. And if we scroll down to this recipes section, then we have this Facebook one. And this looks pretty similar to the layout of our posts. So we have an avatar and some text at the top, then an image, and then some text below that. So it's pretty similar to what we're displaying. So let's grab the code for this. So I'm going to grab this QCard component. And we want to paste that inside this template tag with the v-else. So instead of displaying the text loading, we'll display one of these skeletons. So let's save that and see how it looks. And yeah, it looks kind of cool, but it's not quite wide enough. And that's because this cue card has this max width CSS style on it. So I'm going to remove that style attribute, save that and reload. And that's looking pretty good now. But the top section on the skeleton looks a little bit taller than our top section. And I think that's because the avatar is a bit bigger in the skeleton. If we look at the avatar is way bigger. So let's find out how big our avatar is and see if we can set the skeleton avatar to the same size. So this is 40 by 40. So I'll jump back to that skeleton page, jump down to the API, go to style. We do have a size prop that we can set. So let's see if we can use this prop on this Q skeleton Q avatar component here. So just add size and set that to 40 pixels, same size as our avatar. And let's see how that looks. So I'll reload the page. And yeah, that looks perfect now. Before we move on, let's just remove that set timeout that we added. So we want to get rid of this line and this line here. And I'll just fix the indentation, get rid of these empty lines, save that. And let's just add one more finishing touch to this page. If you found this video useful so far, make sure you smash the like button and leave a comment telling me what you think about Quasar. If there are no posts in our database, then when this request to our posts endpoint finishes, the user will just be left with an empty screen here. It'd be better if we could display a message that says no post yet or something like that. So let's do that now. I'm going to jump to that template tag we added before, which is only displaying these cue cards once we've finished loading the posts. And let's also only display these cards if there are some posts to display. So in other words, if there are some posts in this posts array here. So I'm just going to add another condition to this v-if, which is posts.length. So we only want to show these cue cards if there's something in our posts array. Otherwise, we'll show something else. So I'm going to add another template tag between this one and the one with our loading skeleton. And on this one, I'll add a v-else directive. So we want to show a message here if we've finished loading posts, but there are no posts in the posts array. So I'm just going to add v-else. Actually, this should be a v-else if, because we also have a v-else here, which is displaying the skeleton. So I'll change that to v-else if. And so the condition will be not loading posts. So if we're not loading posts and our posts array is empty, so if not posts.length, then we can have an error here because I've spelled loading posts wrong. And then we can now display a message. So I'll stick a h5 in here, a heading tag, and I'll give this a class of text center. So the text is centered. And I'll give it a class of text gray. Let's give it a nice gray color. We need to put a message in this heading, so I'll just put no posts yet. Let's save that. We do have posts in our posts array, so to just check that this is working all right and it looks okay, once we get the response from our posts endpoint, we can just set the posts array back to an empty array. So I'll just do this.posts equals empty array. We'll get rid of this in a minute. So I'll save that. And yeah, so if there are no posts in the database and our page grabs the post from the database and we have an empty array, the user will now see a nice message instead of just an empty column. And before we move on, we must remember to remove this line where we're setting posts back to an empty array. And so our posts endpoint is pretty much working now. We can grab the posts, display them on the page in date order, And we've added some nice error handling and loading handling and stuff like that. We still have one more video to go in this series, and in that video we're going to work on our create post endpoint, which will be used by our camera page. We're going to set up an environment variable so that we can easily switch between our local API and our production API, and then we're going to work on our create post endpoint. We're going to send our form data from our camera page to this endpoint. We're going to pass it with a library called busboy, and we're going to upload our photo to Firebase Storage and store the new post in the database. We're going to finish up by adding some form validation here, some error handling, and a nice loading state for when we create a new post. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the final video or any other videos. And if you're interested in the full course, where we'll get to turn Quasargram into a progressive web app, then go to dannys.link/QuasarPWA, and the link is in the description.